Hello everyone, hope you're all doing well. Welcome to today's webinar on the topic of Zero Trust Network led by our trainer and cybersecurity analyst Priyanka Abhayankar. Whether you are a cybersecurity professional, a business owner, or simply concerned about safeguarding your personal information, this session is packed with insights to keep you one step ahead of cyber threats. Throughout this session, we will dive into the principles and practices of Zero Trust Network, shedding lights on its significance in today's rapidly evolving threat landscape. So, without any further ado, I request Priyanka Bhayankar to kindly take over. Over to you, Priyanka.
Thank you, Pratik. So, thanks for the welcome again. Let's begin. Now, before beginning or before we actually dive into the zero trust, let me just give you a quick walkthrough of what we'll be going through. So, first thing I would like to give you or take you through the evolution of network security, how it all began, what exactly that the zero trust security model exactly is, the importance of zero trust, why is it so important in modern cybersecurity scenarios, some basic principles of zero trust that it is built upon, a few of the concepts or components of zero trust networks, how zero trust can be implemented, some best practices for the deployment, and a few advantages of what the zero trust is. Now, from the early days of 1G in the 1980s to the groundbreaking era of 5G today, each generation of wireless technology has brought some remarkable advancements in the data capacities, and it has also reduced the latencies, because latency in today's day and age is like it is broken. So 1G, it all began with analog signals in the late 1970s, offering the basic voice calls but limited coverage, limited sound quality. In spite of all of its flaws, it did lay a good foundation for the mobile communication. Then in the 2G, the digital revolution of 1990s brought clearer calls and some introduction to SMS, that is text messaging, which gave you a way or gave a rise to the text and multimedia messaging. Then came your 3G, which was ideated and launched in between 1998 to 2001. This basically standardized network protocols and enabled all the global access, global data access, introducing services like video streaming or VoIP or voice over IP as we call it. Then came 4G, that is the LTE standard, which was introduced somewhere in the 2008 2009, which introduced mobile internet with high speed access. This made HD video streaming, high definition video streaming, and gaming on the go a reality. Now, in the 2019, with all the remote work culture, the 5G burst into the scene, promising some unprecedented leaps forward in the mobile capabilities with ultra fast data rates, ultra low latencies, massive network capacities. Now, 5G is not just about faster smartphones. It is more about revolutionizing the entire industry, right from the healthcare to transportation to manufacturing to entertainment, you name it. With all of these innovations up until now, all of these had been focused majorly on functionality. The security aspect had been very minimal from these innovations in the early days due to the greater need for innovation. Also, the attacks have evolved as the years have passed. The older attacks were more physical in nature versus now they are more digital and more sophisticated in nature. So what is exactly how is it what network security has it evolved? So basically, earlier the idea, for example, I was a user who had a certain identity that was registered on a device, like a personal computer for logon. That computer was connected to some infrastructure or server, as we may call it, which had applications running. These applications accessed some data that was stored, say, on a database server. All of these were connected in a system, and we called it the intranet, kind of an island. So if I was able to get into the premises and was able to connect to the intranet, that would make me trustworthy automatically. But then we started connecting to the outside world, let's say with mail servers, or then we started browsing the internet. But today, organizations have various cloud services in place. Employees are no longer restricted to work from the office premises. I could be working from home or in a cab or even remotely. Also, I may be using different devices such as a personal device or a mobile phone or whatever. The clients that connect to the network also do so with different devices that I may not have control over or even complete knowledge about. Traditionally, organizations relied on a perimeter based security that is commonly called as a castle moat analogy, constructing some virtual walls around their IT environments, such as firewalls or some other tools like IDS, IPS. Within this boundary, all the users and devices were assumed to be trustworthy, enjoying full access to all the systems within that perimeter. However, this approach has now become very inadequate due to all the kinds of modern cyber attacks, modern cyber threats, or remote access culture that has cropped up. Over the past 2 decades, the landscape of cybersecurity has transformed hugely. The rise of commercial internet, cloud computing, mobile communication, IoT, remote work policies, they've broken the perimeters of organizations that were once standing very, very strong. This has led to an increase in users or devices or applications that require access to the systems. And this has basically made uh, distinguishing between the internal and external devices increasingly very difficult in the traditional perimeter networks. Now, enter zero trust approach. What we do here is we are going to design for the internet and going to enforce it on all the intranet too. Because zero trust basically challenges the idea of trust by default. And it requires all of the users, all of the devices and systems to continuously prove their authorization, to continuously prove their authentication before gaining access to any of the resource on the network. Now, basically, by eliminating this blind trust, zero trust is aiming to prevent malicious actors who exploit the increasing traffic diversity and try to penetrate the organizations without being detected. So basically, in implementing zero trust will involve a multifaceted approach, incorporating some policies, studying the IT architecture designs, some cutting edge technologies. Now, normally, what a proactive zero trust will basically rely on identity, on context, and continuous monitoring. Now, what this zero trust basically is. Now, before we actually talk about the zero trust model, let me just walk you through a case study, which was somewhere around during the lockdown period during the pandemic. So, a healthcare provider had faced a major data breach. There were no third-party criminals involved over here. It was one of the insiders. Let's call that insider an XYZ. So XYZ was basically given the privileges of creating users on the network. So along with creating other users, other legitimate users, he created one more user, let's call that user as ABC, with higher privileges. This ABC user was never revealed. No sign on ever had happened through this user on the network. Then XYZ left the company. Organization deactivated the account that was originally or officially assigned to XYZ. But what the organization did not know was there was one more account that was assigned to XYZ that was never revealed. So XYZ used his secret ABC account and leaked the sensitive healthcare data. What's peculiar in this scenario is that there was a lack of monitoring. Since the account was used for data theft that was never earlier revealed and it was suddenly used later, this could have been a signal showing data breach had it been monitored. So basically, zero trust here is a modern security model which is founded on the basic design principle that is never trust, always verify. It requires all of the devices and users, irrespective of where they are inside or outside the organization's network, to be authenticated or authorized and regularly validated before being granted access. So, zero trust basically helps prevent security breaches by eliminating the implicit trust from your system's architecture. Now, instead of automatically trusting the users inside the network, what zero trust requires is it requires the users to be validated at every single access point. We want to make sure that only the right users can come in, only the right users can get access or the right access. They can get access to the right data and for the right reason. This is achieved basically by having continuous monitoring in place. So there are we first need to classify sensitive information in our data in our networks to make policies and controls on what must be protected. So it is necessary to continuously monitor user access and apply least privilege concepts at every single level. Applying network segmentation principles to create some micro perimeters instead of having one single traditional perimeter that can isolate all the say IoT devices. We need to establish a cloud governance process and management solution, conduct inventories, monitor workload configurations. This will basically reduce the attack surface and lateral movement by uh, segmenting boundaries around your network assets. Now, these principles basically lay a groundwork for building your zero trust architecture. There are basically several focal points in your organization when you're trying to implement a zero trust environment. So it is your devices, it is the data, it is the network itself, it is the workload, and most importantly, the people. So uh, defending the traditional network perimeter is not enough for corporate cybersecurity or for zero trust security policy. A zero trust network is micro-segmented where perimeters are defined around each of the company's uh, essential or valuable assets. At these boundaries, it is possible to perform security inspections and enforce access controls, which will make it easier to block any kind of lateral movements of threats through the network and to contain and to isolate a potential breach. Now, for workloads, cloud-based workloads like it could be containers, it could be virtual machines, they are great targets for cyber criminals and they have unique cybersecurity needs. Properly configured cybersecurity, properly configured zero trust security, monitoring and access management, they are very important for protecting these assets, specifically in your public cloud. Now, Most another very important part is that zero trust data. Now, improved data security is one of the primary goals or the primary objectives of a zero trust security policy. Implementing zero trust will require identifying your caches of sensitive data or valuable data, mapping some common data flows, defining access requirements based on the business needs. Now, these policies must be aligned and enforced across an organization's entire ecosystem, including workstations. It could be mobile devices, applications, database servers, cloud deployments, everything. Then comes your zero trust people. Compromised credentials have always been a major cause, a leading cause for data breaches. So, authentication based on usernames and passwords is no longer sufficient, and we have seen it multiple times these days. Zero trust basically will require stronger authentication, multi-factor authentication to be able to safeguard your resources, to be able to safeguard your identities on the public internet. Now, zero trust devices. A zero trust security strategy basically includes treating all of the devices that are connected to your corporate network as untrusted and a potential threat. Implementing zero trust security will require the ability to determine if a device is a threat, and you will require to isolate that if it is compromised so that it doesn't propagate through your entire network. Now, zero trust is basically built upon four major principles. The first one is the least privilege access. This means granting users and devices only the minimum level of access which they need to perform their tasks. This will reduce the potential damage due to a security breach. Privilege can be added as required. A few important things that organizations have started implementing are identity governance and identity analytics, which makes sure that those users or do those users really need the access to those resources, and privilege access management, which is a crucial part which has started coming into organizations now, which makes sure that not only external but also internal threats can be handled. The second important principle is your micro segmentation, that is to divide the network into smaller segments and apply specific security controls to each of the segments based on its requirements. So this will basically limit the lateral movement as in propagating through the network. So what here we do is we basically divide our network into smaller parts. So if at all there is a breach happening on one of the parts, it is going to be limited to that part and will not propagate into the rest of the network. This uh, basically will limit all the lateral movements by attackers within the network, meaning that the attackers, even if they manage to get access to a system on the network, will still find it difficult to navigate to other systems on the network. The third important principle is called as the continuous authentication. Now, this is where we assume breach. Instead of trusting the users or devices by default, zero trust assumes that the threat already exists both inside and outside the network perimeter. Now, continuous monitoring and validations are very important to detect and respond to threats immediately. This generally happens by gathering some signals, like it could be logs, and have a system or a machine learning system that learns from those logs, which will help us to know about any anomalous behavior. The fourth important principle is device user and trust assessment. Now, here we are going to require multiple forms of verifications, such as it could be passwords, biometrics, short-lived tokens, etc., to authenticate the users and devices, enhancing your security beyond just passwords. We need to verify the identity of the users of the device, the health of the device, or even the location of the device. Essentially, we need to register the device, perform health checks to see if they are not compromised, or have they uh, uh, incorporated some basic security measures such as a firewall uh, should be in place, and then categorize the devices that do follow these policies as compliant. This is because if your endpoint or the device is compromised, then things can be faked thereafter. So the users must be given access only to what they strictly need and nothing more. Only those users requiring access to a certain resource must be granted. That means having role based access. Now, it is best to assume that the breach has happened and every resource access request that is received, it has to be verified by default. So, we cannot trust any user in spite of any location, whether it is inside or outside the network perimeter. Now, why is zero trust so important? First is the zero trust security ensures that every access request in the network is carefully checked, unlike all the traditional methods. With this principle of least privilege, no one in the system has full access to the system or full access to the resources. Instead, each request is closely monitored. Again, the micro segmentation that we spoke about, it adds an extra layer of protection by stopping any kind of unauthorized movement in the network, by limiting any potential damage from the breach. So this basically helps in adapting to your modern threats, protecting against any kind of insider threats, protecting or preventing any kind of lateral movements of threats. Now, when with this complete shift to remote work becoming so widespread during the pandemic, security measures that are tied to some specific physical locations like your company offices or your corporate offices, they are no longer effective. With employees working from home, the risk of insecure Wi-Fi's, the devices growing significantly. Now, businesses need to assume that the home setups are less secure than the office. The Wi-Fi routers probably are going to lack proper security configurations. Additionally, there could be some IoT devices such as baby monitors, uh, smart thermostats that may have weak or no security controls at all. Without a comprehensive system like a zero trust framework, it is very, very challenging to ensure or to regulate the security of the employees' remote environments. Now, employer owned laptops and phones are usually managed, they are patched, kept up to date. Um, Security tools and policies have been applied. Even if zero trust security cannot force employees working from home to use the work devices only for work, it can definitely control the potential for a security breach, because the fundamental trust nobody, verify everything rule that enforces access control at every point within the network. So this also helps in building trust in the digital interactions. Now, many industries and regulatory bodies have strict compliance requirements regarding the data protection and security. Implementing zero trust basically can help organizations to meet all those compliance standards such as GDPR, PCI DSS, HIPAA, etc., by ensuring proper access controls, some data encryption, security monitoring. This basically ensures compliance with regulatory requirements, enhancing data privacy and protection, and basically, more importantly, future proofing your security architecture. Now that we have seen why it is important, let's look at the basic components of zero trust network. The first and foremost is your identity and access management, that is IAM. When we talk about zero trust, identity basically becomes a gateway and the most critical actor of verification. It could be a user, it could be a device, it could be an application. Having a robust identity and access management policy is very, very important for a completely functional zero trust architecture. Now, this basically ensures that the network administrators uh, that are normally managed by tools like Active Directory, domain controllers, access accurately can identify each device that is being granted access to and determine the appropriate levels of access for the users and machines. Now, major steps that organizations these days have started taking is access management. Now, whether the user should get access or not, but more importantly, adaptive authentication is considered. That means every time a user tries to access some sensitive resource, a risk score must be calculated that for that particular resource. That means, is the user known from the identity or from the device that they are using, or their general time of access, or is the user recognized but is coming from the device that probably may be appearing to be compromised or jailbroken, or is is it accessing the resource from a location that the user has never accessed the resource earlier from. Basically, this information allows the organization to employ a more sophisticated authentication mechanism to provide better access management. Now, it is very important to know where our sensitive data is coming from and where it is being stored at. And all of that data needs to be encrypted. To know if the data is being used for the right reasons requires data risk analytics, which will give us a chance to look at, let's say, historical data that we may have collected using logs for of access and notice things that we may have missed. Now, this basically helps in finding any kind of transactional frauds. Why is this important? Weak or poorly enforced IAM policies can make networks very vulnerable to breaches. Reports have shown that most of the breaches involve stolen or brute forced user credentials. Attackers use these kind of credentials to move laterally within the network uh, by even evading the detection mechanisms and are able to access some sensitive data areas. Moreover, insiders throw threats or they show a bigger risk as demonstrated by some incidents where former employees exploited their retained access to steal sensitive information. A robust IAM policy could have prevented such breaches. Now, implementing a proper IAM policy is very tough. NIST, that is National Institute of Standards and Technology, highlights the challenge of identifying all the users and assigning specific access privileges. Now, often accounts that are given too much trust, leading to difficult decisions for IT managers. Now, while some users may lack sufficient permissions initially, it is better to grant fewer privileges than required. Permissions can be adjusted later, they can be added later as and when required. Now, interestingly, a survey found that the least principal privileges in IM were rated very low in the importance compared to multi-factor authentication, possibly because it is just easier to justify that way. Now, let's say for an example, An IT staff may have to tell a C-suite executive that he can no longer have access to a huge area of the company network, and probably convince him that doing so is for the greater good of the organization. Now, this seems to be very difficult and seems very awkward for the IT staff as well. Now, greater access can always be granted if necessary. Overall, management support and budget constraints can slow down the zero trust adoption, because the organization still struggle with understanding its components and its implementations. Now, second, the next is network segmentation. Now, micro segmentation, as we already spoke, is a strategy that will involve breaking down the network into smaller segments and applying tailored security controls to each of the security or segment based on its specific requirements. This approach basically ensures that security measures are precisely aligned with the needs of individual parts of the network rather than applying a general policy across the entire framework or entire infrastructure. Now, in case of cloud deployments, microsegmentation um, leverages your network virtualization technology to create some isolated zones. Now, these zones normally they are known as granular secure zones. These basically serve as a protective barrier around the workloads, ensuring that each of your workload is safeguarded with specific, tailored, custom-made specific policies. This means that even within the shared environment where multiple applications run on the same server or virtual machine, each of the workload receives dedicated security attention down to the complete application level. Now we basically want every flow on the network to be proven. End-to-end encryption can be done with TLS, can be done with IPsec, etc. Now we are basically trying to create layers or tiers to apply custom security measures. Now this is important, or this is the importance basically of microsegmentation in modern cloud environment, and it cannot be overstated. With the increase in cloud-based services and increasing complexity of network architecture, the ability that we have to apply finer security controls to individual workloads and applications is very important. It allows the organizations to tailor their security measures and to the or to custom the measures to unique characteristics and risk profiles of each component rather than just relying on one size fits all approach. Now, the third very important category is the continuous monitoring and analytics. With all of the information that we have gained with identity, endpoints, applications, we have gained some context, which gives me an idea of risk. Based on that evaluation, I may want to allow it or want stronger authentication or even block it, for example. Now, continuous monitoring is a systematic and an automated process that will regularly check and evaluate an organization's systems and processes for performance and security needs. Now, by using these automated tools and technologies, continuous monitoring basically can help to detect issues immediately at an early stage, reduce risks, enhance our overall resilience. It offers some real-time insights into system performance, vulnerabilities, and compliance with regulatory standards. This basically enables businesses to take a proactive measure to address any sorts of concerns. Now, normally continuous monitoring relies on automated data collection, automated analysis, automated reporting, and automated response. So this basically involves gathering the data from various sources like system logs, network traffic, um, and network activity. Now, by automating this process, we can efficiently collect a wide range of data to gain insights into our own systems and processes and know what exactly is happening. Then, once this data is collected, automated analysis tools and technologies are used to interpret this data. Now, these tools basically identify some patterns, they identify anomalies and potential threats within the data, which enable the organizations to detect issues and risks very at an early stage. Now, automated reporting generates reports that provide better insights into the system, into the performance, into the vulnerabilities or the compliance statuses. Now, these resources or these reports uh, give you valuable information for making decisions and for helping our organizations understand their security posture at a single glance. Now, basically, there are a few important points to consider while doing this. It is necessary to select the right tools and technologies. There are so many tools such as network monitoring tools, log management tools, security information, and event management, that is SIM tools, etc. Once the tool has been selected, establishing effective policies and procedures is equally important. Now, this will involve defining rules, defining thresholds for alerting and reporting, knowing who will be responsible for monitoring those logs, etc. The next very important component is your security policies and enforcement points. Now, security policies are the guidelines and protocols which standardize how an organization's security measures should be implemented and managed. Now, these security or these policies provide the rules for accessing the data, using resources, and responding to security incidents. Now, they establish a framework for maintaining security standards and ensure consistency across the uh, organization. The policy engine is basically responsible for making the ultimate decision whether the access must be granted for a particular resource. Now, this decision is made in collaboration with the external resources like threat intelligence services. Now, the policy enforcement point in the system is responsible basically for enabling, for monitoring, terminating connections between the user and an enterprise resource. Now, for example, um, an organization may require all security issues to be reported to the IT team within, let's say, half an hour or 45 minutes of detection, or maybe they have specified a certain escalation path that has to be followed in case of a critical event, like involving the management or involving the law enforcement agencies, so on and so forth. The next very important component is user and device authentication mechanisms. Now, these are basically very essential components for ensuring secure access. Now, they verify the identity and trustworthiness of users and devices before granting access, irrespective of the location or the network environment. Now, the user authentication mechanisms can involve multi-factor authentication, which requires the users to provide like multiple identification forms, like their passwords, or there could be smart cards, one-time codes that are sent to the mobile devices, or short duration tokens, etc. Now, because of these multi-factor authentications or multiple authentications, it strengthens the security and it reduces the risk of unauthorized access. So even if there is a phishing attack happening, the chances of it being successful are very minimal, since one of the factor could have been compromised, but the other factor is still standing strong. Now, the device authentication mechanisms verify the identity and security posture of the devices that are trying to access the network. Now, this may involve checking the device certificates, verifying compliances with security policies like up to date software patches and antivirus protections, or assessing the device's integrity and trustworthiness. Now, these devices that meet the organization's security requirements are granted access, and those that fail to meet these criteria are denied or restricted. Overall, user and device authentication mechanism in Zero Trust ensures that only the authorized users and trusted devices can access the resources. This basically minimizes the risk of data breaches and unauthorized accesses. Now, these mechanisms play a very important role in maintaining the security in today's dynamic and distributed computing environments. Now, what do we need to consider when we are implementing zero trust? Now, zero trust is not a product. It is a strategy that must be adopted. It takes time and effectively, it takes efforts to effectively adapt to the change. The important part is to decide the most optimal part to start your implementation with. It could be the user and device or identity, or it could be application and data, or it could be the network. Ultimately, zero trust will connect all of these three, but deciding your starting point is very, very important. So, for that, we need to know where the security controls are. So, we need to first assess the current network architecture. Now, these could be firewalls, it could be web application gateways, endpoint securities, IAM, etc. Now, how granular are these controls? How finer are these controls? Some controls may not be as sophisticated or well configured and may just boil down to trusting a resource or device based on the location. But the biggest caveat here is that it is difficult to actually get the exact information about the actual network architecture and the current implementation. These do impose some of the difficulties. Now, uh, the next is to plan and design your zero trust architecture. Now, while the concept of zero trust is pretty straightforward, figuring out how to implement it is not that simple. Zero trust basically relies on your ability to predetermine which entities are allowed to communicate with each other. This is the most trickiest part, actually. Now, without this knowledge, which is a challenge in IT security planning, organizations tend to adopt overly permissive policies, which basically contradict the idea of zero trust about least privileges. The fundamentals involve effectively managing user authentication, roles, and access. Now, some of the tools are necessary, but a huge part really involves administrative tasks, like ensuring individuals are given only the access needed to fulfill their responsibilities. Now, this becomes a great step in the direction of zero trust. It all begins with identifying what your data is, where it is coming from, because that is what we are trying to protect. It is super important to have a dedicated team to planning and implementing the zero trust migration. Now, there are some implementation challenges which we need to effectively recognize. So, to implement zero trust security effectively, it is necessary that we uh, recognize the main hurdles that we might face. Now, those could be dealing with complex systems, It could be managing the costs that are involved. It could be relating to investing the efforts. It could be finding the right software solutions that can adapt easily. There are many. So for each organization, it is important that they identify their problem areas and work towards zero trust. It can never be done in a day. It is a process which needs time and which needs positive efforts, right? So the next is integrating the zero trust with existing security solutions. So when we are trying to implement zero trust, it doesn't really mean that we are nullifying whatever security solutions we already have in place. So it is very important to seamlessly integrate your zero trust architecture with your existing security solutions like your firewalls, IDS, IPS, or SIM tools, which will ensure the network is secure end to end. Now, assessing the worth of the new technologies during this implementation actually involves measuring the security uh, key performance indicators, that is KPIs. One crucial KPI is the average time that is taken to resolve incidents, which should notably decrease as the organization progresses towards implementing zero trust. Now, some of the best practices or some of the factors that we may consider to deploy zero trust, which will probably ease out the process of deploying zero trust. Let's just speak about those. So, first one is having executive support and alignment. Collaboration and communication among various business units, your IT teams, security teams is very important. We need a culture of collective responsibility to improve the alignment and coordination during the zero trust implementation. Now, regular interactions, some knowledge exchange, collaborative problem solving efforts are very important for effective inclusion of any new technology what we are trying to incorporate on our enterprise networks. Having good support from the decision makers is key over here, right? Then the next one is comprehensive risk assessment. Now, before implementing zero trust, we need to conduct a thorough assessment of your existing infrastructure, your applications, your security controls. Now, this assessment basically will help us identify any kind of vulnerabilities or gaps that needs to be addressed first. Then comes your clear definition of trust boundaries. Now, zero trust basically promotes segmentation of your networks into smaller, more manageable trust zones. This will help in limiting your data breaches and reducing the lateral movement for attackers. Now, defining trust boundaries is very important. So, defining trust boundaries based on your assessment, creating isolated segments for sensitive data and critical systems is very, very important. So, this will basically give us an idea of what our sensitive data is, where it is, what kind of devices have access to it, what kind of users have access to it, and if at all a potential breach does happen, how it may be contained. So this gives us a complete idea. Then the next is multi-layered security controls. Now, the layered zero trust approach basically offers significant benefits by safeguarding against both external threats like hackers or internal risks such as employee misconduct. Now, this approach basically conceptualized, uh, it gives you a lot of key infrastructure or it gives you a lot of idea by implementing security at multiple layers, multiple levels of your network. Now, the key idea of or the key components that are present in the multi-layered approach is the first is identity and access management. Now, this requires to employ robust authentication mechanisms, access control, uh, to ensure only authorized users and processes can access the network or the data or resources. The second key component of multi-layered approach is threat intelligence and analysis. Now, this basically helps us to gather and analyze data on potential threats to detect and respond to them immediately. Now, third important component is continuous monitoring. Now, continuous monitoring basically requires regular monitoring of network and resources for security threats or vulnerabilities by using various tools like vulnerability scanners or penetration testing, etc. Now, by adopting this multi-layered zero trust strategy, organizations basically can enhance their security and reduce the likelihood of security breaches. While this approach is important or entails investment in security technologies and processes, the benefits in terms of enhanced protection for organizational assets really makes it worthwhile, really makes it worth investing. Now, implement a defense in depth strategy by using a multi layers of security controls, combine various security technologies such as multi-factor authentication, network segmentation, encryption, anomaly detection, etc., to provide more comprehensive protection. The last one is the continuous monitoring and analytics. Now, to detect and respond to security incidents quickly and effectively, implementing continuous monitoring is very necessary, is very important. Using advanced security analytics tools to monitor the user behavior, network traffic, and system activities. Now, automating alerts and notifications to ensure that the incidents are responded to in a very timely manner. So, these are a few best practices that we need to follow when we are trying to deploy zero trust. There are some benefits, some key benefits to employing zero trust. So basically, first one, we have the our three criteria that we want to ensure are what are security, integrity, visibility, and compliance. So, a zero trust security policy requires you to evaluate every access request with the least privilege controls. Now, this basically ensures that the requester only has access to uh, the access for the required task. Now, zero trust basically boosts your security by minimizing the risk from excessive permissions and restricting the attacker's ability to move within the network. Now, with those tight constraints on user privileges, potential damage can be limited. Plus, assessing all your access requests based on least privilege controls makes it very harder for the attackers to move unnoticed through the organizations. Now, this makes it very easy for us to mitigate vulnerabilities and counter some advanced threats. Then comes your visibility. Now, in a traditional security setup, defenses focus more on the network perimeter, limiting your external threats. However, now from what we have spoken so far, this approach basically lacks insights into your internal network activities. So, with zero trust model, uh, the security is applied to each application or system individually, allowing you for a better visibility into the network actions. Now, this visibility basically offers benefits beyond security. It can inform IT infrastructure design, such as uh, optimizing application placements to reduce latency, or upgrading systems for better performance. Also, microsegmentation makes it easy to prevent lateral movements into the network, in turn helping with uh, pro- uh, uh, in turn helping to provide a better security to sensitive data and systems. The third one is the compliance. Now, compliance or companies face various compliance obligations based on their operations and the data they handle. Laws like GDPR or CCPA and regulations like PCIDSS, HIPAA, they basically aim to protect sensitive information. Now, to comply, organizations must show that they are securely managing the access to this data. So, zero trust security will offer a lot of visibility into the access requests, crucial for compliances. It basically uses least privilege controls to prevent any kind of unauthorized access and provide some detailed access logs for audits ensuring compliance. So, this provides a more holistic approach to security. Now, in zero trust, the principle of least security means users get only the minimum permissions they need. So, this basically reduces the risk by limiting what each user can do within the organization. So, having said that, it is very important to recognize that the journey to zero trust will differ from organization to organization. Whether small or large, implementing zero trust is like running a marathon. So it takes time, it is gradual, and it needs patience and efforts. So prioritizing projects and initiatives one step at a time, starting with most critical assets and vulnerabilities. Now, zero trust basically needs to be implemented upon various pillars such as your devices, data, networks, workload, and people. The zero trust approach basically represents a paradigm shift in cybersecurity, which reflecting an uh, evolving nature of threats and the need for more proactive and more resilient defense strategy. So, by adopting zero trust principles, organizations can better safeguard their digital assets and mitigate the risks of sophisticated cyber attacks. So, as we navigate through the complexities of this digital age, we need to understand the transformative power that zero trust has and work towards a more secure and resilient future for the enterprise security, where it gives us the power to reduce the data breaches, support compliance initiatives, and to reduce business risks. So I hope everyone may have enjoyed the webinar. I open the forum for questions. Participants can paste, place their queries in the Q&A section.
There is one question, Priyanka.
Yeah. Uh, what role does automation play in managing and maintaining a zero trust network? Basically, automation tools or machine learning tools give you a better insights. Basically, just like I spoke earlier, the logs or the granular insights that we gain or the events that we log of our network are can be given as a feed to your automation tools like SIM tools or any threat management tools, which will allow you to gain better insights into your network, which will make or which will help us to understand the network better, or help in analyzing or help in knowing any kind of anomalous behavior that may be uh, uh, being posed in our network. So automation basically does play a very important role in managing or maintaining a zero trust network. I hope that answers your question.
There is one more question.
Uh, Best practices for monitoring and detecting suspicious activity in a zero trust environment. So basically, like I said, uh, to actually be able to detect suspicious activities, it is important to know what devices are connecting to the network, to know what requests are coming in for network resources or for any kind of resources or any sensitive data, monitoring those requests, looking at the specifics of the request, that is, uh, who the request is coming from, what kind of device the request is coming from, what location, is it the normal location from where the request is coming, is it the normal time frame in which the request is appearing. All of these factors contribute to detecting whether a request could be genuine or it could be a suspicious activity. So it basically, again, automation here, and knowing or learning from the devices that are present on your network, learning from the devices that usually connect to the network, gives you a better idea at detecting suspicious activities in a zero trust environment. I hope that answers your question.
There are no more questions. We can, I guess, wrap up the session.
Sure, sure, Pradeep. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope everyone enjoyed the webinar.
Thank you, Priyanka, for this wonderful session. I hope everyone enjoyed the webinar. The recording of the session will be posted on our YouTube channel. Thank you.
Thank you, Pradeep.